ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Verne Lundquist, our 2014 Distinguished American. Daniel. One more, Daniel.
I think Merton Laverne Lundquist needs a response, especially the junior part of it. Now, wouldn't you, if your legal name was Merton Laverne, be quite urgent to shorten it to Verne? It happened to me. Rob, thank you very much for the very warm invitation. Thank you for that amazing tribute that CBS paid me and that you saw fit to run tonight. I've been introduced at banquets like this a few times, and never with the significance of this evening, I promise you that. But I want to share with you a story that goes back to the late 70s. I was lucky enough to win the Texas Sportscaster of the Year award, and it's a huge honor because you're voted on by your peers, and they fly all the state winners who can make it back to the town of Salisbury, North Carolina for the awards banquet. And then at the night of the awards, they line you up alphabetically by state. Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas. I'm down at the end representing Texas, standing between John Ward of Tennessee and Dave Blackwell of Utah. The public address announcer at the Charlotte Speedway, a young man then, like I was our MC for the evening. He was rotund like I am, and he was really nervous. He was going into a flop sweat. And he came back to me and he said, "I'm just having trouble with your name." Verne Lundquist? I said, "No, it's Verne Lundquist. I'll get it right." 2 minutes before we went out, he comes back a second time, sweating even more. Von Landquist? No, it's Verne Lundquist. So now we start across the stage, one by one, and they get down. Here's John Ward from Tennessee. John walks out. The guy looks at me and his eyes got wide. And now, the winner from the state of Texas, from Dallas, please welcome Verne Ludicrous. Jack Buck was in the audience, Joe Buck's late father and a good friend. He never called me anything but ludicrous for the rest of his life. It is such an honor to be here. We have been immersed in the tradition and history of college football for the last weekend, and I must tell you, I was promised that this weekend was unlike any other. I believe it. Because I so love the tradition and history of this sport, and because I want the men behind me to understand the link from Walter Kemp through George Halas, through Tom Landry, through others who have passed away, to the greatness of this college sport. And in so doing, I just want to share a couple of memories with you about two legends of college football who had a profound impact on my life. My dad was a Lutheran minister. He was ordained on D-Day, the 6th of June, 1944. Our first parish, his first church, was in the town of Everett, Washington, about 30 miles north of Seattle. I was 4 when we moved there. The church sat on a corner, the parsonage behind it, and there was a vacant lot next to the sanctuary. And I swear at least 2 or 3 times a week, from the time I was in the first grade until the 6th, 10 or 12 of us would gather in that vacant lot in our football uniforms, which consisted of, we called them tennis shoes back then, ragged blue jeans, and then most significantly, the white t-shirt, upon which we each would stencil the number of our favorite player. And so for 2 years, while he was at SMU, I wore number 37, Doak Walker. Thanks, there's more. There was no television, of course, but Doak was such a prominent player. that SMU appeared on national radio. I listened to every game that I could. I thought during his junior year when he won the Heisman in 1948, from my perception from the radio, that's about as good as you could play. I read everything I could about him, including the number of times he was on magazine covers in his career, 47. And my perception then was he must be a better guy than he is a football player. Well, I met Doak in the mid-'70s in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. He was a better guy than he ever was a football player. As luck would have it, Nancy and I moved to Steamboat in 1984, and Doak lived there with his second wife, Skeeter Warner Walker, who was twice an Olympic champion. We became very, very close friends. It was a dream come true for me. So close that over 15 years, from 1984 to 1998, when Doak passed away, we sponsored the annual Walker Lundquist Steamboat Invitational Golf Tournament. Doak was paralyzed in a skiing accident in February of 1998 and died 8 months later. And among the biggest honors I've ever had in my life was when I was asked by the family to give his eulogy. I still think of him almost every day. Well, we moved to Austin in the summer of my 12th year. I saw my first college football game there. I was selling Cokes in the north end zone of Memorial Stadium. We put the bottles, because there were no cans, into a big wash tub, and carting that thing around for a 12-year-old made for a long afternoon, especially when you got your pay for the day, and it was usually a quarter or 30 cents. The first game I saw was Notre Dame against the University of Texas. Well, they weren't very good. Notre Dame won that game, 14-3. They won a few others. And in 1957, my senior year in high school, Texas reached out to a 33-year-old coach from Washington, Darrell Kenneth Royal. As luck would have it, in 1963, after graduating from college, I went to work as a sports anchor at KTBC TV in Austin, the station owned then by President and Mrs. Johnson. We were the only station in town because the president wouldn't allow anybody else to have a broadcast license. The University of Texas was quite prominent, and they went on that year to win the national championship, undefeated, and I got to go to every press conference. I went to most of the games and earned a great degree of respect for Darrell Royal because of his integrity, his organizational skills, but I think most of all, his sense of humor and his interaction with his players, the media, and the fans. Well, I moved to Dallas. I began to do college football for ABC in 1974. And in 1980, I got paired with Coach Royal. We were partners doing a weekend telecast for ABC Sports for about 14 weeks. We kept up a great relationship. It evolved into a friendship. And then the last few years of his life, and he died in 2012, were not so good. He was battling Alzheimer's. I was doing a basketball game in Austin in February of that year, Villanova at Texas. And Bill Little, the SID, came up to me before the game and he said, "Coach is here. He's having a really good day. He's one of the suites upstairs. Would you like to go see him?" And I said, "Get me at halftime." Bill did. We scurried up the back stairs. I walked in, and Coach Royal was having a really good day. Enough so that I had a chance to speak with him for a couple of minutes, give him a huge hug, and tell him I loved him. And that was the last time I saw him. But I think it's important to share stories about these two legends of this sport to provide a continuum from Walter Camp to the 40s, the 60s, and to you fellas in 2014. This is a great, great sport, and I'm proud to be a part of it. I did that first telecast in '74, moved to CBS in '82. You saw, Ari, I know that hurts you to watch that last video. Chris Davis, 109 yards, who knew? And I'm going to tell you one quick football story. I've got my eye on the clock, and it relates to the time of night, but you'll understand when I get there. I did Brigham Young at Utah State with Ben Martin, the late Air Force coach, Chad. And we didn't have a large audience, but we thought it was going to be a really competitive game because Brigham Young was undefeated at the time, 5-0. Utah State was 4-1. And it was just a sensational mid-October day in the Cache Valley in Logan, Utah. Well, Lavelle Edwards had a pretty good team. He came, we thought, well, you know, if it's a 7-point game, it's going to be fantastic. At the end of the first quarter, it was 28-0, in part because BYU had 3 quarterbacks who played in the NFL. Gifford Nielsen with the Oilers, Mark Wilson with the Raiders, and some guy named Jim McMahon who made it with the Chicago Bears. The score kept mounting, the game kept lengthening. It was 42-10 at the half. Lavelle changed players, but the score kept going up, and the shadows began to fall. The game got into the 60s for Brigham Young in the fourth quarter. The stands had emptied, a chill had come into the air, and our director, Joe Assetti, took a shot of a little tiny elderly woman sitting all by herself in the north end zone. She had a shawl around her shoulder, a scarf down her head, deeply etched lines in a well-lived face. And I was desperately trying to say something appropriate to the moment. And Joe pushed down the key by which he could contact me. And he said, "She was a freshman when this game started." Jim, yeah, I get kind of the same reaction every time I tell the story, especially this late at night. When Jim Monaco called me to inform me I had been selected for this, I told Jim, and I meant it, I was overwhelmed and stunned when I looked, because I knew something about Walter Camp. As I hope I've expressed to you, I love the tradition and history of this sport. I think it's important, as many of our speakers tonight have alluded to, it is character building. But when I looked at the list of previous honorees, I was stunned to see the first 5 that included Red Grange and George Hallis and Jim Crowley. Made me stumble to understand the kind of fraternity into whose company I have now been invited to keep. It's still an overwhelming thing. So my congratulations to the All-Americans, to all of the folks here on the dais, to the alumni who came back. Sam, going to the hospital yesterday was a treasure. Taking the tour with you this morning of the campus was amazing. I've never seen anything quite like the Payne Whitney Arena, ever. All right, one quickie. Well, I hope it's quick. I was at ABC Sports for 8 years, but I was always on the periphery. I was never one of their main guys. To give you some idea of where my career was headed, now keep in mind this was 1980, I was the sideline reporter for our telecast of the North American Soccer League. I did get to work with Jim McKay for 2 years, one of my idols in this sport. So Nancy and I, my lovely wife, we were in Texas at the time before we moved to Steamboat. We were watching Monday Night Football, and this is the kind of a crowd that remembers Howard Cosell. I'm not sure you guys do. Well, you might after this. He's going on in Monday Night Football with Meredith, Cosell, Frank Gifford, and they come to the promo for the college games for the week. Now, I can't do a really good impression of Howard, but I can try. And so the lineup on ABC Sports for the weekend. We're going to show you Georgia and Auburn in the Southeast. We've got Michigan State and Michigan in the Midwest. Texas and A&M down south. Out west, UCLA and Arizona State. And they're in little tiny letters. There was an asterisk, and it said, Salisbury State at Hampden, Sydney. And that was a contractually guaranteed Division III game, and Howard went into his rant. Well, I'll tell you what, that's the game I want to see. I think I'm going to call Roone Arledge tomorrow and send me to the Salisbury State Hampden Sydney game. We laughed until the next morning when I got a phone call from New York, and they said, listen, on your way to the Soccer Bowl Championship in Washington, Roone wants you to drop in and do the telecast of Salisbury State and Hampden Sydney. And it turned out to be a great experience. It's a gorgeous college, gorgeous. Founded all male in 1776. So I went to do the game with John Dockery, and we had two cameras, one here, one here. And right behind the end zone camera at this end was a 3-story athletic complex, housed the offices of the coach, and it was the basketball court. And right before we went on the air, two guys in two windows unfurled 4 bed sheets sewn together, on which said, ABC Sports welcomes, Hampden Sydney College welcomes ABC Sports. Smaller letters, where the hell is Howard Cosell? Even smaller letters, who the hell is Verne Lundquist? This has been an amazing weekend for Nancy and me. I relish the honor. It is something that we will cherish for the rest of our lives. Thank you, guys. Have a great night.